Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Tonight's second half is absolutely a very interesting subject, horrifying, and just kind of stomach-turning, if you ask me. Before we get into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below, merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon and please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really help this channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into tonight's second half, shall we? Tonight, Dogman fam, we are going to discuss the battle at Dulce to stop the alien breeding program. Government scientists, the secret government, purportedly labored alongside an alien force to work out the sundry ways the general population could be brought under an ultimate totalitarian control that would leave humanity as little more than farm animals to be used for breeding. All of which began with a 1947 treaty signed by President Harry Truman that set in motion a plan where the elite would obtain alien technological secrets in exchange for permitting the aliens to abduct human subjects for their diabolical research. In time, the elite would be allowed to survive, to become the overlords of the human sheep under ultimate control of the aliens, like the dogs that watch the sheep on the human farm. Located almost 2 miles beneath the Archuleta Mesa on the Jicarilla Apache Indian Reservation near Dulce, New Mexico, was an installation classified so secret its existence would be one of the most protected realities in the world. There was the Earth's first main joint United States government / alien biogenetic laboratory. Others existed in Colorado, Nevada, and Arizona, not to mention in a number of other locations like Afghanistan and Russia, but Dulce is and was the largest. In an area when the officers in charge of the major military units were still part of the generation that looked on young women, potential mothers, as a treasure to be protected, to learn that thousands of young females were being abducted and even created / cloned for use as slaves by aliens was simply too much for such men to allow to continue. The turning point came when the National Security Advisor, Dr. Zbigniew Brzezinski, met with President Jimmy Carter in the White House on June 14, 1977, with a number of other intelligence operatives and leaders to bring the president up to speed on the number of top-secret programs, including Project Aquarius, and the work being done at Dulce, Area 51, and other secret bases. Brzezinski, a member of the power elite that backed the Gray Cause, never guessed that the president would be so shocked that he would soon turn to trusted military advisors in the military intelligence community for opinions on how to stop what had been going on. The National Security Agency, or the NSA, had been secretly fighting the alien cause and the humans that worked for or with the aliens since it was established in the mid-50s. Project Aquarius was originally established in 1953 by the order of President Eisenhower under the control of NSC and MJ-12. In 1966, the project's name had been changed from Project Gleam, which became Project Aquarius, and portions of it went into deep cover, hidden even from the CIA and the NSC. At that point, the NSA had opened Department X to identify and study all alien or enemy operations that could be a threat to the United States or the human race in general. Department Z to react and neutralize any sort of threat to the United States or the human race. Under secret presidential order signed by President Jimmy Carter, the NSA's Department Z and newly established Delta Force and a specially handpicked group of Air Force SOC, Navy SEAL, and Army Rangers were organized for a mission so secret that not even command officers were told what it was about until the night of the attack. The only attack team leaders who knew what this would be about were the men involved in the NSA Department Z, who had been involved with fighting aliens for years. The commanding officer of the attack was none other than Captain Mark Richards, the son of the infamous Dutchman, Major Ellis Lloyd Richards, who had been in commander of the International Security IS since Admiral Chester Nimitz died in 1966. By 1978, the NSA Department X was warning the human commanders of new programs starting in Dulce that were so frightening that even seasoned men of war were shocked. Thousands of young human females were being cloned in test tubes to be slaves for the aliens, but these clones were proving to be less than satisfying for the aliens because they did not suffer the same way the once free victims did. They could be engineered to provide better tools for some of these stranger life forms, but they were proving to be nearly mindless and thus couldn't react with the fear the normal young women could. For that reason, while the clone program would continue, it had been decided that the abduction program would be stepped up, with the forced short-term attacks to increase by 1980 to over 100,000 a year, and the facility to be enlarged for long-term victims who would stay there for as long as they lived, with numbers over 75,000. The labs at Dulce started cloning human females by process perfected in the world's largest and most advanced biogenetic facility, Los Alamos. The elite humans who manipulated the world's government from the shadows would soon have a disposable slave race for medical culling of body parts and their own perverse pleasures. Like the alien Grey, the United States secret government secretly kidnapped and impregnated young females, then removed the hybrid fetus after a 3-month time period before accelerating their growth in laboratories. Biogenetic programming was then instilled, many being implanted with all sorts of devices, some that allowed them to be controlled at a distance through RF radio frequency transmissions. From EDH Archives, Dulce interview, WC/289487-346/80. Level 7 is worse. It was like a whorehouse to prevent ETs. Human females were brought there for experiments, but you can't convince me that most of it wasn't just sadistic pleasure for the Greys. They wouldn't just impregnate the girls, they would torture them for hours. Sure, there were scientific procedures, but there were also orgies where their few pretty human females would be given to a large number of Greys for nothing less than brutal abuse. And this was constant. Hundreds of Greys and other species that seemed to be friends to the Greys would come and go every week for no other clear reason than to take pleasure with the provided human females, when the truth was evident that subhumans and other creatures were being produced from abducted human females impregnated against their will. a secret resistance group formed within the military and intelligence agencies of the United States government that did not approve of the deals that had been made with the off-worlders. Many of these brave humans would be assassinated or die under mysterious circumstances, or would be silenced in other ways. But in 1979, they would manage a victory that would cost the Greys and the humans that backed the Greys dearly. The Air Force intelligence officer that reportedly was the man who met with the aliens at Holman Air Force Base in '64 was legendary Dutchman Ellis Lloyd Richards Jr., the same man who would reportedly order the attack on Dulce in '79 and whose son, Captain Mark Richards, would lead the human attack on the facility. The Richards name came up time and time again when one looks into any of the mentioned top-secret projects that military intelligence, or the eyes-only top-secret agencies known as international security, were involved in from World War II through the Cold War years. The in-house political argument that developed within Majestic 12 in the late 70s, when the military intelligence men objected to the deals with some of the aliens on the side for selfish gain of such groups as the Illuminati of thousands or the Club of Rome at the expense of thousands of innocents, if not all of mankind, helped to cause the rift that would lead to the military action taken against the Dulce facility in 1979. Later on in the Dulce battle report, it is written, it would be one of the reptoids who taught several of the men involved in the attack on Dulce a number of the informative points that would first cause them to look more deeply into what was being done at the facility, and then help them better understand their enemy and how to defeat them. Indeed, it would be this reptoid who communicated the basis for a number of the plots being organized against humanity by a number of off-world sources, and some of them had proven their willingness to aid the human cause in the Battle of Central Asia in 1976 and in August of '79, space defense of Earth against the alien invaders. It was also they who warned of the danger that such life forms as bacteria represented to both aliens and humans. In '79, there were 37 alien species represented at the Dulce facility. Only 6 of those had their own space or dimensional traveling ability, while the others were guests of the Greys. All of those species had come as guests of the Greys, were there for genetic and reproductive experiments with humans, and 8 of those were also interested in humans as a good source of food. Of those interested in reproductive experiments, 25 could enjoy direct intercourse with human females, although several needed the female to be placed on special hormone treatments ahead of time. And at the facility apparently got a reputation of being a pleasure spot for the quadrant. Of course, not all reptoid-type creatures are friendly towards humans. According to Lear and others, the United States government may have made a pact with a non-human race as early as 1933. According to some, this race was not human, yet claims to have had its origin on Earth. Some sources allege that this predatory race is a Neo-Surian nature. This has led others to suggest that the dinosaurs which ruled the surface of the Earth in prehistoric times may not have become entirely extinct, as commonly believed, but that certain of the more intelligent and biped hominid mutations of that race developed a form of intellectual thought equal to or surpassing, in some respects, especially with their collective mind matrix, that of the human race. The theory then suggests that some of this race went into space only to return to find that their founders on their home planet had not survived. On the surface, that is, however, there are several reports of reptilian humanoids being encountered in deep underground natural cavern systems all over the world, and in time, the space-based reptoids learned of this. There were a number of facts quickly put forward. For instance, one branch or mutation of the supposedly extinct sauroid race, the Stenochosaurus, was, according to paleontologists, remarkably humanoid in appearance, being 3.5 to 4.5 feet in height, possibly grayish-green skin, 3-digit clawed hands, and a partially opposable thumb. The opposable thumb and intellectual capacity are the only thing preventing members of the animal kingdom from challenging the human race as the masters of planet Earth. For instance, the ape kingdom possesses opposable thumbs, yet it does not possess the intellectual capacity to use them as humans do. Dolphins possess intellect nearing that of humans, but does not possess opposable thumbs or even limbs necessary to build. The cranial capacity of the Stenochosaurus was nearly twice the size of that of human beings, indicating a large and possibly advanced, though not necessarily benevolent intellect, according to researchers such as Brad Steger, Val Valerin, Tal Levesque, and others. This may actually be the same type of entity or entities most commonly described in UFO encounters, as well as the same type of creatures depicted in early 1992 in the nationally viewed CBS presentation Intruders. According to Lear, the government may have established a treaty with this reptilian race, which they later learned, to their horror, was extremely malevolent in nature, and were merely using treaties as a means to buy time while they methodically established certain controls upon the human race with the ultimate goal of absolute domination. The fact that a base like Dulce might house dozens of these types of races of ETs would never be admitted by most humans and would be reduced to the stuff of legends if ever turned over to the general public. The years of work to cover up the alien threat had worked very well by 1979, and normal people would not admit seeing an alien for fear of being called crazy. The types and races at Dulce at the time of the attack are still in question, and many races have not wanted to admit they're taking part in what took place in '79. Many victims find their abductors to be nothing less than brutal beasts. The casebooks of researchers are filled with incidents in which malice and hostility played a significant role in the abduction. Unfortunately, most of the victims who suffer these more vile attacks do not get the chance to make any report to any human authority about the event, as they vanish and become another statistic in the growing number of missing persons across the country. By the early 70s, the number of these missing persons, mostly all young white women, were all going up, while the abductions of humans by superhuman forces of varying descriptions appeared to obey the same mechanicalism. Worldwide, it was clear that young white women were the most frequent victims and that there was little support for abductees should they survive. In the more controlled environment of Dulce, researchers had no disclosure problems concerning stem cell and cloning research. The fertilized eggs of hundreds of healthy young females could be harvested constantly for unlimited embryo and stem cell research, killing uncounted human embryos in the search for everything from cures to alien skin infections caused by earth germs to how to better create a subhuman slave race of cloned work creatures. Such research also moved into other dangerous fields, such as enhancing humans into becoming creatures that would serve other alien needs. One of the more shocking of these was that the attackers would find in huge holding pens were human females who had been enhanced to become reproductive cows as the need for human milk and reproductive systems had grown. Hundreds of young women had been altered to become little more than cows. Free will is always dangerous to the fascist society or police state. Free will is what allowed a group of men to take the moral high ground and attack the Dulce facility. The attack plan centered on crippling the main generator, then doing as much damage as possible while freeing as many victims as possible, started to take shape in the fall of 1979. After the August space battle between forces of the United States Air Force Space Command and an alien invasion force with none other than Brigadier General Adder Holt, United States Air Force brought in to head the organization that would be formed for the invasion of the Dulce facility, funded by Texas businessman Ross Perot, CIA, DIA frontman Edwin Wilson, and a massive Black Ops fund long hidden by Major E.L. Richards, Jr. The plan moved forward quickly within a small community of intelligence officers and their backers. Brigadier General Harry C. Adderholt would pull a team together in September and October of '79 and would have made any commanding officer proud and perhaps shot fear into any enemy who had any idea of what was being put together. Colonel Roger H.C. Donlin, stationed at Fort Leavenworth at the time, would head one combat team drawing heavily from the newly formed Delta Force, Navy SEALs, and United States Air Force Special Operations Command. Flight teams were organized by astronaut scientist Carl Gordon Hines, and including the best of the best in combat and test pilots with special operations training, or who could be counted on to keep their silence, including Captain Mark Richards, who was recovering from his command role at Dragon Squadron in the battle that had taken place in August. While exact numbers of human force involved is still so protected that there seems to be no film on record of the exact account, there were never more than a few hundred who knew anything about the operation. The center of the operation was clearly found in United States Air Force Space Command and the director of IS, Major Ellis L. Richards, Jr. The President of the United States, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and the Chairman of the JCS were never informed of the pending operation, and it should be noted that the humans and aliens involved in the attack took part in the action without orders or clearances from higher authorities. Those who fought against the aliens did so against the will of the human elite, many of whom may have been reptilian shapeshifters in human form, according to some sources like David Icke and others. One of the men who was hit the hardest by the horrifying stories emerging from out of the Dulce underground base was William Randolph Leathers, born in St. Louis, Missouri, a graduate of Yale in '41. He served in the OSS as a captain during World War II, teaching map reading in Aberdeen, Maryland, for much of the war. One of the members of the top secret task force had hit the secret German military facility in Afghanistan in '45. He had been a close friend of the Dutchman from that time, moving to Greenbrae in Marin County, California, in '67 to be part of the headquarters team for IS. His cover was as an employee with the John Hancock Life Insurance Company. Captain Leathers had lost his wife in '71 and identified with several of the husbands and fathers of victims. He had 4 children of his own. For his own reasons, Captain Leathers died on October 22, 2001, at the age of 83. It would be Leathers who worked with NRO satellite photos, U-2, and SR-71 photos, the military maps of the area, until all of the major portals to the Dulce complex were spotted and marked. He would lead one of the assault teams himself. Having turned 60 in 1978, Captain Leathers would be the oldest member of an assault team to take an active role in the attack. Most of the troops would come from 3 sources: Delta Force, United States Air Force SOC, the NSA Department Z. The U.S. Army's 1st Special Force Operation Detachment Delta would be one of the 2 of the U.S. government's principal units tasked with counterterrorism operations outside of the United States. the other being the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, better known as SEAL Team 6. Delta Force was created by United States Army Colonel Charles Beckwith in November 1977 in direct response to numerous well-publicized terrorist incidents that occurred in the 70s. From its beginnings, Delta was heavily influenced by the British SAS, a philosophical result of Colonel Beckwith's year-long 62 to 63 exchange tour with the unit. The Delta Force at Bragg was already considered to be the best special operations training facility in the world. After the assault on Dulce, the CQB indoor training range would be given the ominous nickname House of Horrors in the memory of what could not be remembered. Most important, Delta Force had their own fleet of helicopters. Painted in civilian colors and fake registration numbers, the helicopters could deploy with Delta Force operators and mount gun pods to provide air support as well as transportation, while not being easy to spot as military units from the ground. It was decided that these air units, after delivering Delta Force operators to several locations for forced entry into the facility, would come in with the NSA Z team as air support in the assault on the main landing port. The Air Force Special Operations Command would be in charge of taking and holding the main landing port. The job of Air Force SOC operators was to quickly turn a given patch of hostile terrain into a fully functional airfield. Sometimes this means a stealthy attack by motorcycle and ATV, and other times it meant cleaning out hostile forces by whatever means was necessary. In years to come, the Air Force SOC Special Tactics Combat Controller might have used Special Operation Force laser markers to create a spot where the laser-guided bomb could aim and neutralize the enemy. But in '79, they had to do that with manpower. Performing a diversified job required a diversified range of combat hardware. Air Force ST operators carried a variety of small arms, including an M9 9mm pistol with sound suppressor, a Remington 870 12-gauge shotgun, the M203 standalone 40mm grenade launcher, the M4A1 Special Operations Peculiar Modification 5.56 carbine, and the M249 5.56 SAW squad automatic weapon. By making extensive tactical use of night vision gear, Air Force SOC airborne capabilities were provided by the 16th Special Ops Wing, which is based at Hurlburt Field, Florida, and by units of Special Operations Group at RAF Mildenhall, England. These wings had been the long-time vision of Major Ellis L. Richards, Jr., and others like him, and the Dulce battle would be the first time they were used fully in combat. But because of the special problems of entry into the Dulce facility, normal helicopter attack would not work. As well trained as they were, to attempt a landing into a hangar area of the facility would have been suicidal. The Dulce landing ports were set up to accept the light craft and other mass accelerator beam riders used by the Greys to transport from planet to orbital pickup points. These craft generated hypodynamic thrust driven by microwaves and pulsar lasers to accelerate the classic flying saucer up to altitudes of 50 kilometers and accelerations at easily allowed orbital velocities. This made the human style of heavy lift chemical rockets and expensive folly, and allowed the aliens' Earth to orbit travel at will for a relatively low cost. It also gave human forces a way into the facility, because an infrastructure of orbiting stations were used to reflect energy from solar power hidden on the dark side of the moon. There were a number of ways to track such a ship. The light craft focused the microwave energy to create an air spike that deflected oncoming air that could be tracked, and electrodes on the vehicle's rim that ionized the air and formed part of a thrust generating system could be seen by real-time cameras, and even in human eye at close range. Thus, it was planned that one of the attack teams would enter the facility when the main port's doors were open and ready for incoming light craft. This was not going to be an easy stunt. Sensors around the area set off an alarm if anything got too close to those doors, not to mention warn the operators of any air or space vehicle that got too close. The mouth was too small for anything larger than a good-sized helicopter, but helicopters would be too slow to reach the doors before the base defensive systems went off. And once inside the port area, any attack force would likely be overwhelmed by the base defenders, unless whatever craft was used could carry a number of heavy automatic weapons and land a large number of attackers at one time. The Greys were quite content that no such craft existed in the human military inventory, and not even the reptoids had a craft that could be used under all of the required conditions. That wouldn't be spotted long before it could reach the spot. What they hadn't counted on was a single experimental aircraft that was still so secret that it had never entered on the inventory list. Manufactured by the Bell Corporation, the X-22 was a research craft with some interesting abilities. The first successful V-STOL VSS variable stable system aircraft, this strange mix of wings, jets, and huge ducted props might not have been pretty, but it was perfect for the mission needs of the Dulce attack force. Because of the lack of time, the only man involved who also had the skill to fly the X-22 under such combat conditions was Captain Mark Richards. Thus, he was chosen to lead Combat Assault Team 3 that would be responsible for attacking the main landing port and hold it long enough for the other teams to land in conventional helicopters and for evacuation of cats and victims when the attack was concluded. According to the reports, Captain Richards had no more than 12 hours flying the X-22 before he took control of it. While the attack teams were being organized and trained, the attack itself was being planned by the men responsible for the situation. Objectives and alternative were picked, including a nuclear option in case the manned attack failed. Astronaut David Griggs was chosen to go with Cat Team 3 to make an attempt to loot one of the alien spaceships, while astronaut Ronald Irvin McNair went in as Richard's co-pilot and laser weapons expert. The fact that he had a black belt in karate also came in highly helpful before the event was over. Astronaut Lieutenant Colonel Ellison S. Onizuka, United States Air Force, and Colonel Stuart Allen Rosso, U.S. Air Force, also went in as members of Cat 3 to gather info and hopefully escape with alien ships or equipment, with Captain Rusa commanding the material acquisition team. None of their efforts could be of value, of course, unless an attack plan worked. To make sure of its success, the full information gathering ability of several top-secret departments within the NSA was turned loose on Dulce. Facts were gathered from sources far and wide, including everything from sightings listed in the newspapers to interviews with people who helped build the facility. John V. Chambers, a Kentfield, California resident, spent his working life in management and finance of a large engineering construction project. It would be Chambers who had been involved with the Bechtel work at Dulce and other top-secret group projects, who would be contacted by the forces that intended to attack Dulce and become convinced to aid them in their effort. It would be Mr. Chambers who would mention a number of weak points in the Dulce system that would allow an attack to have a much better chance of success. Chambers, who pointed out major weak points for the aliens. It seemed the aliens had reason to worry about a number of germs found outside the facility, and that some of the alien species were highly vulnerable to a number of human past diseases. The germs and bacteria that were everywhere on our planet that humans and other mammals have, for the most part, developed ways to cope with, can offer great threat to aliens and their life forms. Earth dust or bacteria blowing in the winds can be deadly to a life form that has no resistance to such things. What humans refer to as hay fever can be just as deadly to a creature that is having a difficult time breathing in the Earth's oxygen-rich atmosphere. It was quickly realized that if the filters used to make Earth's air more acceptable for the aliens could be disassembled, many of the enemy would soon be sick and unable to continue to fight, and a large number may die right on spot. Again, for lack of time, Lieutenant Colonel Unzuka took on an extra duty of leading a secondary team, the main landing port, once Cat 3 had secured the area, to disable the central air filter exchange that was next to the landing area. He created the title of Filter Assault Team for his group with a customary smile. As the intelligence gather expanded, a number of shocking facts were uncovered. In 1947, the Dutchman had been involved with Admiral Byrd in the attack of the last Nazi base at the South Pole. Now, he and others would come to better understand the connections that elite humans had developed with the aliens, from the days of the Nazi efforts to modern times. This included helping the aliens to build secret bases all over the Earth, including the base at the South Pole and the facility at Dulce, aiding in the abduction of young women for alien research and pleasure needs, and the addition of more pollution for planet atmosphere to bring the global warming and make the Earth a more friendly environment for alien life forms. One of the most shocking finds was the extent of alien underground base and transportation network. While tube trains had been expected, the vast bases that had been created came as a shock to even those best informed. The result such bases become more important now was that the human forces had to quickly find out where every base was that might react to an attack on Dulce and how long it would take before they might send rescue forces. Another question was, would they react in general? Might they attack humanity in some more deadly fashion than simply abducting a few thousand females a year? In the end, it became clear that because of division in alien intentions, there was little organization between the groups. Like a number of competing colleagues at a ruin, for the most part, they were only interested in their own little outpost and research. As for the rank and file men who took part in the mission, most of the names would be avoided to protect those men who are still alive. As of 2001, there aren't many still living, and those who are still involved as military operatives in one service or another. Men of the United States Air Force, SOC, and Delta Force are some of the best trained warriors anywhere on the planet, and were more than ready for the challenge, even if nothing could have made them ready for what they would find once they got into the facility. There are a few general things to know about such men. If one's self-esteem was fragile and required constant positive reinforcement, then a career in any of the organizations was definitely not for that person. Consider a typical Delta Force training exercise held in the shooting house, where a mannequin terrorist held a real live volunteer hostage. The goal: destroy the terrorist without harming the hostage, who happened to be a Delta Force trainee. Of course, for special missions, the terrorist mannequin could be replaced by a gray alien. Command Sergeant Major Eric L. Henley had been there for the formation of the elite group in '78, being there for some of the first missions and grueling training. Within the next 10 minutes, The door would be blown in, and 4 of his classmates would assault the room using a close-quarter battle technique we had learned. Bullets would rain through the room, and someone would be firing live rounds within inches of my head. If they missed a single terrorist or hit me by mistake, the team would fail this phase of training. I sincerely wanted them to pass the exam, Henley wrote in his 2001 book, Inside Delta Force, the story of America's elite counter-terrorist unit. Of course, one got to participate in this practice session only if one was successful completing torturous training that culminated in rugged 40-mile hike across the steep mountain of North Carolina, a 50-pound rucksack, and a machine gun strapped to your back. Henley's description of that 18-hour test of his physical and mental stamina was one of many excellent narrative highlights in his account. Henley, an Army Ranger, when he had been hand-picked to try out for the elite unit, was one of 12 men out of 163 who made it to level Delta Force operator. The new Delta Force members then disappeared from a more visible military units. We operated like guerrillas or terrorists because the reality was, in order to become experts on counterterrorism, we had to first become expert terrorists. While Henley did not mention the Dulce mission, he did include the failed attempt to rescue Americans held hostage in Tehran, in which 8 American military personnel died. Other missions included some of the world's toughest places, such as faction-torn Beirut in '81 to guard the U.S. Embassy, quelling rebel insurgencies in Central America, including fighting Cuban guerrillas in Grenada, and protecting ambassadors, presidents, CEOs, celebrity prisoners, and offspring of all of the above. This was not accomplished without killing people, a task that Henley described in chilling detail. Like most of the men involved in the Dulce attack, Henley was the kind of guy you wanted on your side in a street fight. Skilled, intelligent, and disciplined, but distrustful of the motives of some authority figures, especially career-climbing colonels and DC bureaucrats, with Beckwith, Leathers, and Donlin leading the 3 land force cats. The sock men would be attacking under the command of a man most had never fought beside, but whom most had heard about. Now, for the mission against Dulce, they were under the command of the Dutchman's son, who was something of a legend in his own right in the Black Ops circle. 2 things were beyond question. The younger Richards had proven himself in combat, and he had never asked his men to do anything he was not ready to do himself, or any would be left behind at all. While his missions had almost always been so top secret that nobody knew details, the rumors and trail of evidence was more than clear to any in the know. The only problem for the command chain was his reputation for being something of a loose cannon when it came to following orders that he didn't think were in the best interest of his men or the mission, a fact that just made him more popular with his men. In a typical command move on his part, he sat in the X-22 with his troops ready to take off on what looked to many to be their last mission. He recited a prayer/poem, "I am a commando," to his men, their motto more than this: "As my brothers, commandos before me, I am proud to step into history as a member of the Air Force Special Operations Command. I will walk with pride with my head held high. My heart and attitude will show my allegiance to God, country, and comrades. When unable to walk another step, I will walk another mile. With freedom, my goal, I will step into destiny with pride and the Air Force Special Operations Command." As he powered up the X-22 and gave the order for the helicopters to follow, he pushed the strange tilt rotor aircraft to its flight limits in a wind high-speed bank over the runway to impress the troops still on the ground and set the tone for the mission. Over the earphones and speakers came his voice, then the voice of team members with him in X-22, singing the Air Force hymn, "Up and Away into the Blue Yonder." We couldn't very well let a bunch of smash open the gates of hell without the rest of us being right behind them, said one U.S. Air Force helicopter pilot. Timing was everything, with the X-20 taking the first wave of Cat 3 racing over the desert at over 250 miles an hour, with the bottom of its rotor tubes missing the rocks by less than 20 feet. They had to hit the main landing port as an expected ship landed. As Cat 1 and Cat 2 came in on cargo tube trains several levels underground, Cat 4 was going to hit, with SEAL team coming through the water intakes as the main group hit the small support hatch that would allow them to open another hatch to allow the SEAL team in. Everything, however, revolved around the success of Cat 3's attack in the main landing port, as they had to remove the main security control room and the Sonics weaponry systems that were controlled from there. The X-22 came in as planned, racing over the Badlands at over 200 miles an hour, while less than 20 feet over the sand. 5 miles behind her was the main assault force being flown in a heavy Air Force helicopters. The timing had to be perfect, hanging on the timely arrival of a large disc-like vehicle that was a known and expected cargo shuttle from space. As observed, the main landing port blanketed holographic projectors were turned off, and the entry blast doors were opened for the landing shuttle. Witnesses said that Richards brought the X-22 so tightly that its landing gear missed touching the top of the moving disc, only by inches, lowering his roaring craft with the disc until he had cleared the upper support grider system. Then the X-22 shot around the side of the shuttle, using it to block any attack from the main gun mounts of the landing port. The X-22 fired its Hellfire rockets to smash 2 gun blisters on the closer side of the port as it landed on the roof of the main port control facility. The attack was textbook, with the Cat 3 forces blowing an entry into the control tower and taking full control of the facility within 55 seconds of the X-22 breaching the port. Hovering, the X-22 continued to use its rockets and guns to rake any enemy weapons in the port area, silencing them before the Air Force started to enter the open port doors. It was Ted Cochran of San Rafael, California, who had been an Air Force helicopter rescue commander in the HH-43 Huskies based in Saigon in the height of the Vietnam conflict. Licensed since he was 18 as a pilot, Cochran also served with the United States Air Force and the Air Force in Europe, where he had participated in recovery of a lost thermonuclear weapon in Spain. On one of his last helicopter missions before his legal retirement of the United States Air Force, he was part of the recovery force that found Apollo 9 mission after the moon landing in '69. Returning to California, he got his master's degree in communication from Stanford in '72 and became a well-known filmmaker. A sailor, outdoorsman, an aviator, Cochran combined his spirited passions into a career that allowed him to share his adventures with film audience. His best-known film was The Island of Bounty, about an international sailing expedition that traced the 1789 route of the famed HMS Bounty mutineers to the Pitcairn Island in the South Pacific. At 39, Cochran was in his prime and had been more than willing to accept the request for his help as a helicopter pilot in some event like Dulce mission. The fact that he was a longtime friend of Richard's family seemed to have something to do with his involvement as well. Indeed, it was rumored that he had taught the Dutchman how to fly the big HH-43 Husky and had flown in Black Ops missions with the Dutchman's son several times before. He was one of the first names to be considered as a pilot. It was Cochran who led the United States Air Force SOC helicopters in, bringing his bird in fast and putting her down on the main floor of the chamber, where the troops would have to cover have cover by the nearby disk as they ran for the nearby passenger entry hatch. Seeing that the landing disk was now trying to escape, Richards landed on the edge and kicked the props of the X-22 into full downdraft, nearly flipping the disk. Fighting to regain control of the X-22, he was forced to make a hard landing on a nearby pad, sending 4 more rockets into the shuttle, forcing it to crash onto a 2 parked triangular craft that were known to be a fighter-type vehicle. Although the men of Cat-3 were now taking heavy weapon fire from a number of directions in the landing port, they had disabled the main weapon pods and the sonic systems for the whole facility, allowing other teams to attack from different directions and locations. Holographic image systems were shut off, so the entry ports, air shafts, and other systems that were normally hidden now became fully exposed. An alien security team had managed to close the main doors into the central hub, and the first 2 men who attempted to get explosive close enough to damage the huge blast doors were cut down by enemy fire. Taking heavy damage, the X-22 rolled forward, and from less than 40 yards firing her remaining rockets. The resulting explosion blew the doors open and wiped out any aliens on the other side for 100 feet. Forced to feather the now burning engines of the X-22, Richards took control of one of the Cat's team attack teams and led the attack through the still smoking entry into the main center hub as other teams attacked from other directions. The multi-leveled facility at Dulce, with the central hub controlled by an extensive base security force, proved far more extensive and complex than the human attackers had been ready to cope with in the original plan. Information sources such as Thomas Costello had clearance levels that did not allow them to know the full scope of operation. His Ultra 7 clearance granted him knowledge of 7 known sublevels. There were more. Most of the aliens supposedly were on levels 5, 6, and 7, but there were more. There also was a more vast network of shuttle connections under the ground than expected, extending into the global network that had not been reported, providing escape routes and entry ports for rapidly deployed additional security forces that had not been expected. In a report filed in early '80, believed by a number of CIA sources, that had been written by Brigadier General Alder Holt, the author states, "What those young men did was nothing less than the stuff of legend. Against overwhelming numbers and technology, they fought from level 1, containing the garages and hangars, down into the bowels of that enemy base. Portions of that command took and held level 2 ports, where tunnel shuttles and disk maintenance areas would have allowed enemy reinforcements to enter, while the main force charged forward towards level 6 and Nightmare Hall to rescue thousands of human victims kept there. They were not ready for what they found in level 6. Reports spoke of multi-armed, multi-legged humans in cages and vats of humanoid bat-like creatures at least 7 feet tall. The aliens had learned a great deal about genetics, things both useful and frightening, and most of it had been learned at the cost of human suffering and lives. Captain Leather's flight reached level 7 first, blowing the main hub entrance open and neutralizing the security force there with extreme prejudice in less than 45 seconds. On entering the security station, they realized the extent of the facility for the first time, finding systems for watching and controlling over 30,000 captives on that one level alone, and the control and security systems for moving the captives to testing facilities and pleasure centers in over 62 different locations, where another 4,600 captives were currently kept. Captain Leather's report to the IS would mention that moment. I looked over the holographic images of scenes of horror that are impossible to express in words, and a zoo of human beings in various states of health and mental condition. Seeing images of women being tortured at that very moment, all I could think of were my own daughters for several moments. Then I collected my wits and gave the orders to move forward to release as many victims as we could. While the original mission plan had called for the teams to attack, smash as many enemy facilities as we could, and withdraw in less than a half an hour. The introduction of so many human victims added a new dimension to the problems at hand. While none of the officers in charge will admit to who made the order, recorded radio communications and eyewitness reports seem to suggest that Alderholt allowed the young Richards to change the mission demands as the numbers of salvable victims became more apparent. Captain Leather's IS report reads, "It wasn't like we had choices. We couldn't leave those poor girls behind alive. We knew that that we didn't evacuate, we were going to have to terminate. Our problem was simply numbers. Thousands of aliens trying to kill us, thousands of human females screaming for help, thousands more so far gone that we knew we would just have to leave them behind, thousands of enemy troops starting to arrive on the subway trains. We just weren't set up for a mass evacuation." The sub-tube back to New York and one to Mexico seemed to still be open, so we started loading girls into tube trains and shooting them off as soon as we knew our forces were in control of the stations at the other ends. We blew 2 air shafts wide open, so a couple squads could get girls out that way into fresh air, where hopefully our people could pick them up. Cat 4 took a real beating as they fought to keep alien reinforcements from entering the main sub-tube stations. There is no doubt in my mind that we stayed in that facility too long, but at the time it was very hard to leave those poor young women behind. We knew that everyone who failed to send out in front of you was going to die, and soon. Exactly 1 hour after X-22 had first attacked the main port entry, Alderholt ordered full recall. David Griggs and R.E. McNear had by then managed to get 2 alien craft airborne, 1 disc craft and one of the highly advanced triangular fighter craft, and were running for Area 51. Russa men also had managed to get a huge disc shuttle moving, in which over 3,600 human females had been loaded and were now being taken to a safe base. The human attack teams were now withdrawing behind the walls of smoke and set explosions. One of the frightening bits of equipment that the map men had found but been forced to leave behind was a type of cell electrostatic disruption device, a weapon that could be set to disrupt the cells of a living creature at a subatomic level, thus killing everything living in an area while not doing much harm to any structure or equipment. To make sure there would be no survivors left in the facility, that device was set by the MAT technicians to go off shortly after full withdrawal of the TAC teams. Lieutenant Colonel E.S. Unzuka, who had led the filter attack team, managed to repair the X-22's battle damage before taking command of the captured alien triangular fighter craft, as the wounded Richards fought a running retreat with the last of the rescued females and the survivors of Cat 4 and Cat 3. Onizuka provided cover fire from the alien fighter craft. This gave Richards the time to reach and restart X-22 as Colonel Donlin loaded the last victim as he and 2 of his men fought off attacking alien shock troops. Nearly overwhelmed, the human fighters in the X-22 would have likely not made it into the air if at that moment several battlecraft hadn't darted into the port facility and started laying down a brutal fire pattern against the other aliens. While one can only guess at reasons for this sudden aid, it has long been reported that the Dutchman and his son had highly questionable off-world contacts. From eyewitness accounts of the battlecraft, one had symbols on its wings of what human experts in the field suggest marked the craft as belonging to something like a prince of a royal house. Whatever the case, the reptile battlecraft fought on the side of the humans. Indeed, 2 of their craft were lost in the battle and gave the X-22 and Onizuka's fighter craft and the last 2 helicopters a chance to escape. 72 minutes, 14 seconds after the attack had started, the X-22 and the reptilian battlecraft with princely markings cleared the landing port blast doors and dashed for safety. Explosions from dozens of set bombs started to blow up enemy craft as they took off, and 35 seconds after they cleared the doors, the CED went off, causing every life form, alien, human left inside of that facility to demolecularize at a subatomic level. Only a few in the heavy shielded lowest shelter levels survived. The human female survivors were taken to several top secret bases where they were deprogrammed and rehabilitated so that they could slowly farm back into society with no memory of what they had suffered. As the mysterious Commander X stated, from one of my intelligence works within the military, I can say with all certainty that one of the main reasons the public has kept in total darkness about the reality of UFOs and aliens is that the truth of the matter actually exists too close to home to do anything about. How could a spokesman for the Pentagon dare admit that 5 or 10,000 feet underground exists an entire world that is foreign to a belief structure we have had for centuries? How could, for example, our fastest bomber be any challenge for those aerial invaders when we can only guess about the routes they take to the surface, eluding radar as they fly so low, heading back to their underground lair? The Greys, or EBEs, have established fortresses spreading out and to other parts of the United States via means of vast underground tunnel systems that has virtually existed before recorded history. All of the men involved in any of that attack team were either mind-wiped or sworn to secrecy on the pain of death or terminated. Note, by higher-level insiders following the battle, several self-serving politicians and elite who had nothing to do with initiating the attack, but who had everything to do with suppressing any information concerned after the fact. Because the officers in charge were seen as heroes by many of the political right wing that took control of Washington in '81, most were protected by the changing political elite. Many of those who had either openly backed the alien cause or had profited from it in one way or another were forced to pull back from their position for nearly 10 years. Only when George Bush Sr. became president were the aliens able to return, and then only in much smaller numbers. The Battle of Dulce ended. The alien hope for using the Earth as a breeding tank for subspecies or for their takeover of the planet at any time in the near future, while the Greys restarted a breeding program in '93, and some of the lower levels of the Dulce facility were reopened in '98. The numbers are in the tens of hundreds rather than thousands. The United States Air Force Special Command now tracks all alien craft. With the constant threat of top-secret flights, can react and attack any other world enemy at any moment with dramatic results. Over 50 years of intense UFO interest, investigation, researching, evaluation, and theorizing by countless UFO aficionados have enabled modern field investigators to better examine, evaluate, and identify many of the unusual airborne objects being reported. Yet a small percentage of the reports continue to elude positive identification. Rumors of what took place in Dulce in '79 have already been reduced to legend at the end of the 20th century. Indeed, the continued conmen involved in such reports have helped the United States Air Force cover the truth of events that took place at Dulce and continue to aid in effort to hide the ruined facility and those who took part in the events there. Men like intelligence officer William Cooper, who have become too loose with their knowledge of the truth, can be discredited in a number of ways or terminated if they became too great of a threat. It should be clear from their actions and their willingness to challenge authority that these men must never be allowed in such position of power or authority again, or rather, such is a mindset of the human or shape-shifting elite. While the Dutchman was terminated in '96 and his son will be in a prison for the rest of his life, the mindset itself that created such men to be crushed if the human race is to know peace with the aliens. No, but then again, the elite and gray alien version of peace is more akin to assimilation. The illusion of freedom that may be lost by those few who know what is really going on will be a worthy exchange for amazing technology that will come into the hands of the human elite, so they reason, that takes part in the newer transfer. This may not only take place easily, of course, until all human resistance has been removed either through retaining or through conquest. This is a distorted reasoning of the elite who would sell out their planet for their own selfish personal physical gain. One of the key lessons to be learned from the Dulce battle is, as long as there are a small, highly trained and well-equipped human force that can, may, or will go into action on their own accord to protect the people of the earth, easy conquest of the planet is difficult. A departmentalized military with some branches so top secret that even the political elite who rule the country aren't too sure of what is out there is a threat to any enemy. At this time, there are arms of the United States Air Force Space Command so top secret that no one in the Pentagon knows that they exist. If humanity is to survive long enough for it to make a historic place in the civilized social structure of the universe, they must either defend themselves from any life form that would harm them or their planet, or surrender themselves to some sort of interplanetary police force that will protect them. At this time, only rumors of such police force have reached those in the know, leaving self-defense as the only real option. The men who attacked the Dulce facility in '79 understood that reality and took the task of defending humanity in their own hands. One can only make subjective guesses at what might have happened if they had not done what they did. These are the heroes. Brigadier General H.C. Alderholt, Mission Commander; Colonel Charles Beckwith, Commander of Delta Force in Cat 1; J.V. Chambers, Engineer for Bechtel; William Cooper, Intelligence Officer; Colonel R.H.C. Donlin, Commander of Cat 4; David Griggs, Astronaut, Liberated UFO; Commander Sergeant Major E.L. Henley, Delta Force Commander; General R.T. Harris, Commander of the United States Air Force Communications Command at Scott Air Force Base; Carl Gordon Hines, Organized Mission Team Flights; General D.C. Jones, Chairman, Joint Chief of Staff; Captain W.R. Leathers, Commander, Cat 2; R.E. McNair, Laser Export, Liberated UFO; Lieutenant Colonel E.S. Unzuka, Commander of FAT, Liberated UFO; Major E.L. Richards, Jr., the Dutchman, Commander of Chief of Dulce Mission, Head of IS; Captain M. Richards, Commander of Cat 3; Colonel S.A. Russa, Commander MAT; Edwin Wilson helped to fund the mission. God bless those brave Americans who fought for our safety and the rights of humanity. God bless America. All right, folks, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in to tonight's second half. Upstate New York is getting smashed right now by this one thunderstorm that has been circling around our town for about, I don't know, it seems like an hour now, and it doesn't seem to be letting up. We got some wicked strong winds, 20-something miles an hour, and just this hellacious thunder and lightning. At one point, I thought the whole sky was just growling. That's what it sounded like for almost 30 seconds. It was just the strangest thing. It's still doing it now. You might be able to hear it as I'm talking. It's still going. Like, it's just the longest thunderclaps I've ever heard. But anyway, guys, I hope that you guys are safe tonight. If you guys are in any kind of inclement weather, if you are in a storm area, seek shelter, stay safe. With that, thank you for supporting the channel. It truly means the world to me. You guys rock. And with that, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on your pets, your children, your loved ones. These creatures are out there, and they are watching. We think Dogman and Bigfoot are the biggest problem. No, there are things that come out of portals, things that come out of government labs that make Dogman and Bigfoot look tame. Anyway, with that, stay safe and God bless.